Will AI and large language models replace doctors? Are they the best possible source for health information for you? I'm going to discuss why I think you should have caution around these things, even though they can be useful tools. And I'm going to start off with really factual points, which I think are kind of indisputable and very much grounded in science. And then if we have time towards the second half of the episode, I'm going to get into more what you might call wild speculation. And so if you really enjoy, a strictly scientific and fact-based uh, evaluation of things, then perhaps I'll let you know when we veer away from that, and I am going to talk about some wacky stuff. But if you're all into hearing some wacky stuff, then stay tuned to the end, and we'll get into it as to why AI may not be, in every case, the best tool for you to use to optimize your health or to fix your health issues.
Perfect introduction. Hello and welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and that was my co-host, Elwin Robinson, the creator and founder of Genetic Insights and also the author of the Rejuvenate Blueprint. And today, as he just said, we are discussing the ins and outs of AI in healthcare. So tell me, Elwin, why did you want to talk about it and where do you want to start?
I'm kind of concerned about the impact that, and let me just clarify first of all, we're going to use the term AI because I think that's what everyone kind of uses these days. But what we're really talking about is large language models, or LLMs, today. AI is actually, depending on your definition of it, it's been around for a long time. AI, of course, stands for artificial intelligence. Um,
But that can be a little
artificial
bit
me
deceiving because if we think about things, especially within humans and intelligence, we're thinking of conscious beings.
Right. And the question of consciousness around all of this is where it will start to veer into, more speculative, kooky territory, maybe around the midpoint of this episode. But for now, yeah, the idea is it's the ability to compute, the ability to quote unquote think things through, which doesn't necessarily, like a calculator, you could say is artificial intelligence. It's making calculations, right? So, and then obviously beyond the calculation, there's a certain amount of calculating that can be done, and that's been going on for a long time. So, in the world of AI, they talked for a long time about this thing called the Turing test. And so, basically, this was this threshold with AI that people were excited about AI were very much focused on. And the key threshold is, in conversation, can the AI trick you into thinking that it's really human? And there was a movie not that long ago called Ex Machina by science fiction director called Alex Garland, and it's about this android, and could she be convincing enough to pretend that she's human and stuff like that. And so this was like science fiction a few years ago. Is what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure that movie came out less than 10 years ago. But then a couple of years ago, the Chat GPT 3 came out, and everyone was shocked at how well it passed the Turing test. Like, people you could no longer tell if it was a human being answering or if it was a machine. That was this big threshold. And as I said, for a very long time, all these proponents of AI have been talking about that as being, at the biggest threshold. And we passed it. We passed it a couple of years ago. Now, that's for most people. I, in my arrogance, still believe I can tell when I'm talking to AI. But to be honest, AI has a lot of limitations placed on it, and perhaps if all of those are removed and if it were truly unbound and uncensored and contained, maybe I wouldn't be able to tell, because it is true that it is very convincing, and there may be reasons for that we'll talk about more when we get into the speculative aspect later. But the bottom line is, I think a lot of people, most of the time, if not all the time, maybe everyone, when you're in conversation with this thing, it feels like you're talking to an actual human. And even if you use your intellectual capacity rather than your emotional capacity, again, like there's nothing that, oh, it takes a human to understand that. A machine can't understand that. Like the machine understands. And so that is a really big deal. And so that's really, when we talk about AI these days, that's usually what we're talking about. AI itself, like just machine processing and machine learning, as I said, been around for quite a long time. We use it in genetic insights, for instance, to process data. But it's the fact that you can converse with it, and for all intents and purposes, it seems like a human, only maybe smarter, quicker, more informed, maybe, although that's definitely debatable. That has impressed so many people. And so, what are the consequences of that? Well, there's a lot of them, and I tried to do news shows for a while, but if anyone's wondering what happened with that, it was just too much like time I had to spend for the episode preparing, doing research to make sure that it was actually properly informed. Suddenly, I had to be, not only did I need to have expertise on optimizing health, suddenly I need to have expertise on current affairs as well. It was too much, so that's why I dropped it. So I don't want this to become that, like me talking about all the sociological implications of this change that I said recently, this AI passing the Turing test with these large language models. Of course, GPT-3 was the original, but there's a bunch of them now. There is Claude, there is Google Gemini, there is Grok, and then there's a bunch of others as well, like smaller ones. And then out of those, there are loads and loads of apps that kind of use those, like a plugin or an app or whatever you want to call it, that use those to do all kinds of other more specialized functions as well. And there's thousands, maybe millions by now, of different apps that utilize these technologies that people are utilizing. And it is a big deal. Some people think it's going to transform the world. It's going to make most people unemployed, because there's so many jobs that it seems to be able to take over. I think seem being the key. It's not established yet and not really proven, but it may be the case. I know there's a lot of people worried about it, that it's going to take their job. There are certain simple tasks it seems to be able to do. So far, it's funny, there's a lot of there's often been a big distinction made between white collar and blue collar, and that's the distinction between people who work with their hands and then people who work with their minds, for want of a better word. Although actually, people who work with their hands have to work with their minds too. But white collar being, people who work in an office. I guess that's the distinction. Usually on a phone or on a computer. And generally, the white collar is considered like the higher status work and like the safest work. And it was, I think, believed that, a lot of physical processes, because that's kind of since the Industrial Revolution, 200-ish years ago, there's a lot of mechanical things that have been taken over by machines, whether it's, agriculture, textiles, creating clothing, all these things that used to be extremely time-consuming, like machines have taken over.
Automated now. A lot of it's automated.
To a large degree compared to 250 years ago, 100%. And so that was kind of the general thinking, like thinking and executive function, all the rest of it, that's something that machines are less likely to take over, and all the physical, mechanical stuff, machines are more likely to take over. But now with this LLM thing, it kind of thrown the whole thing on its head, and it's suddenly, doctors are more easily replaceable, lawyers are more easily replaceable, accountants are more easily replaceable, coders, and it's thought because of how important computers are, that people who code, software engineers, developers, all this kind of thing, these would be the jobs that would be the hardest to replace, and there'll be machines doing all the physical stuff. So with this switch in LLMs, all of that has been turned on its head now. And it's like, well, you still need a plumber, you still need electricians, you still need mechanics, you still need all these jobs. But it looks like, your all the white collar jobs, like the ones I just listed, they're actually the ones that are more in danger of being replaced, which is, interesting. And yeah, maybe true, maybe not. I think it's already happening to some degree. Like there are junior level things that are already being done by LLMs or AI, like research for legal stuff, or basic kind of writing jobs. The LLM seems to be able to do quite well. Basic research and writing, I think, are the most obvious things that it's able to replace. But that encompasses a lot of different professions, a lot of different areas. Translation, for instance, I have a client who's a translator who's really worried about it taking their job, etc. But anyway, the thing that I want to focus on, of course, is health, because that's what we're here for. And I have been concerned. So there's a lot of talk about how, um, it. So let's say, all right. So I'll give an example. Defense area. I had kind of a lump on my hand about a year ago, and I was like, "What is that?" And people are like, just put a photo of it, send it, give it to AI, and it'll diagnose it better than a doctor can. And I was like, okay. And I did that, and it said it was a ganglion cyst, which is really not something to worry about. Goes away on its own. Turned out it did go away after a few weeks, and hasn't come back. But anyway, but I went to a doctor as well, and they were like, yeah, it's probably going to be a ganglion cyst. We'll arrange for you to have a scan if it persists, and so yeah. So I just want to say, I don't want to appear like a Luddite that's completely anti-AI. I've tried it a bunch of different times for a bunch of different purposes, including medical diagnosis. And absolutely at that time it was good. And you could say, it was helpful because, I mean, my brain doesn't go there, but a lot of people, I guess, any kind of lump, they immediately think the C word, oh, I'm going to die. And so, I guess it's helpful before you get to see a doctor to have something go, it's probably nothing. It's probably no big deal.
Prior to ChatGPT and these other, as you call them, long language models, it was Dr. Google, and then it would just be all these other things, and you'd be clicking through, well, it could be that, could be that, could be that, could be that. So
it's a good point. And yeah, it's probably an upgrade to that, right? Because if you're looking, just Googling it, it doesn't really, it doesn't see the thing, and it can't give you analysis of, the percentage chance of different things. And so a lot of people's brains go to a worst case scenario. So yeah, you're right. In that sense, it's probably actually an upgrade. And at least it's able to see what's going on with you specifically. So I get all of that. But here's what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is this concept from computer science. I looked it up before this episode. I think it's been around since the late 50s or early 60s. I learned about it, I don't know, in the 90s from an author called Robert Anton Wilson. And it's often shortened to GIGO. And it stands for garbage in, garbage out. So it's this basic concept with computers that if the instructions that you give it are incorrect, garbage, then the outputs are going to be garbage. So its outputs are only going to be as good as its inputs. I guess that's the key thing. And so the thing that I worry about in the area of, to some degree, diagnosis, but really much more treatment of any kind of health issue or any kind of health optimization strategy. Because generally with the main, I usually recommend people go to medical professionals. Often they're quite resistant to the kind of people I know, but I recommend that they go there for diagnosis because I do think that's, at the very least, medical professionals, not always, but tend to be good at it. Of course, you go to 10 different medical professionals, you often get 10 different opinions. So that proves it's not, as objective as they like to say. But anyway, I often recommend them for diagnosis, but especially for treatment, we have to think about this. So we have to think about, first of all, just like with Google, as you said, so the internet used to be, I'm old enough to remember this, 15, 20 years ago, quite, not completely, but quite a free domain. And Google would genuinely index things just based on kind of things like around popularity. There's a whole thing, SEO, search engine optimization. But, it's basically like if people liked the website and they liked what was on there, then they'd show it to people more. And that was the case for a while. And during that period, people like Dr. McCullough, for instance, Dr. Axe, their websites became very, very popular. They cracked the code or whatever of providing information to people that they wanted to hear and presented it well and all the rest of it. And then Google, especially, and the other search engines as well, became under pressure from various interests, which we can discuss in a second, to say, well, wait a minute, there's all this pseudoscience, there's all this snake oil, there's all this unproven health advice that's showing up at the top of the search results when you look something up. This is no good. And so they made the search engines make these changes. So basically, mainstream, authorized, government approved, and really pharmaceutical industry approved um, results would show up much higher in the rankings than everything else. And so I think it was, I don't know exactly when it was, but uh, between 2015 and 2020, I think those changes came into effect, and certainly by 2020, it was already well in place. It might have started even before then, but certainly, you know, by 2015, it was already starting to change. By 2020, it really changed. Is roughly what I remember. Um, and so then suddenly, if you're looking up stuff, everything you're going to get is mainstream, and you're going to get very little in any kind of search results that gives you any alternatives. So again, I gave the example of a cyst. Okay, but what about like I've just been told I have type 2 diabetes, for instance. What do I do about it, right? You're going to Google and you're not going to get different perspectives anymore. You're going to get the mainstream medical perspective. That's what you're going to get. And you're going to be told it's uncurable and, here's the standard advice and, there's nothing much you can do other than that. And so that's a problem to me because it is so all right, let's talk about why. So this gets a little bit into politics, but it's definitely not about one side or the other. This is side free as far as I'm concerned. Every side seems to be bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical companies when it comes to this issue. You occasionally see little glimmers on both sides of specific individuals who try and buck that trend, but that's generally how it goes. And so we have to understand that the pharmaceutical companies, although they're not the biggest companies in the world, the biggest companies in the world are like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Meta, maybe Alphabet. So that's Facebook and Google. So they're the biggest in terms of market cap, as in like what they're worth. But the most profitable companies in the US, and the US companies are the most profitable, the biggest in the world, are generally pharmaceutical companies. So there's a lot of companies that have these massive valuations, but often they're losing money every year or they're barely making any money. The companies that are actually making a lot of money, like profit, even though they may not be valued as highly as Google, Amazon, Apple, whatever, are the pharmaceutical companies. They have a lot of money and they very aggressively spend that money in a way that furthers their interests, as all large companies do, to be fair. But they have a lot of money. And so the kind of bottom line of that is there are very few politicians who are not being paid something by some kind of pharmaceutical interest on every side, whichever, you might be in a country that has more than two parties. Fine, they're probably funding all of them. And also the media, the mainstream media, certainly, and even alternative media you see more and more now, they get corporate sponsorship. And some, famously, the mainstream news media on TV in the US, more than 50% of their advertising comes from pharmaceutical companies. I remember when I was learning marketing back in kind of 2010, one of the marketing teachers, he talked about the distinction between direct marketing and kind of brand-based marketing. And he said, if you're a large corporation, you're doing what he called defensive marketing, which basically means, and his explanation for what that meant at the time is, you're basically just reminding people you exist. So, if you're McDonald's, you kind of don't have to say, "Hey, you can come here," and there's this thing called a Happy Meal, and we have burgers and fries, and then the drink, and it's much cheaper if like they don't have to explain all that. Everyone knows that. They just have to remind you, "Hey, remember McDonald's?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, McDonald's." Like that's all they have to do. But so he called it defensive marketing. But when I really thought about it later, I was like, I think there's more to it than just reminding people. Defensive marketing is actually also introducing a conflict of interest. So basically, if you spend money advertising with a certain platform, whether it be a TV channel or a newspaper or a website or anything else, you then have leverage that if they, and especially if they're supposed to be a news organization, if they're supposed to be journalists, if they're supposed to be investigators that are there to differentiate truth and falsehood and maybe expose corruption and conflicts of interest and all the rest of it. If you are funding them with advertising, you can say to them, uh, we don't like this story. And if you publish it, then we're going to stop funding you. And so defensive can be, in that category. And, the cynic could say, a lot of those pharmaceutical ads on TV, it's like 20 seconds of something that barely makes sense, and then 10 seconds of disclaimer and this huge list of side effects. And then a lot of the time, the things that they're advertising, you can't even get yourself anyway. You have to have a doctor prescribe it. So they tell you, go and ask your doctor for it. And it's like, well, why are you advertising to people a product that they're not even allowed to get themselves? That the doctor is supposed to be the one who decides if that's a good idea for them or not. And yeah, maybe the answer is because then
They
they
won't
have that
publish that news
leverage.
story. Yeah, exactly. It's like you don't want to upset the sponsors.
So that, yeah, and those two things I said, I think are quite well known. But I think what's a little bit less well known, that was exposed probably more mainstream than ever in the last 5 years, is how the whole academic institutions and the institutions that are supposed to be doing objective and unbiased research are also completely corrupted and taken over by that same system. Because in the end, scientific research costs money, and so someone has to fund it. But then on the other hand, the institutions that do the research, which are often institutions of higher learning, universities, etc., they need funding. And so even if someone were to come in, let's say I ended up being really, really wealthy, and I was like, I want to go to university, I want to prove that this alternative non-pharmaceutical intervention works. It's not just the fact that I have the money to fund it. It's like, if it conflicts with that, it's like they've got to choose, right? Because they're getting a bunch of funding from interests that are either directly or indirectly from pharmaceutical companies. So it's not just that I have the money to fund the research that I want. It's also that, like, they have to think, do I want to take that money and allow that research when it is annoying this much larger source of funding, or this much more consistent over the year source of funding? And then, beyond just money, there's relationships. It's like, my husband or my wife is on the board of the pharmaceutical company. I'm on the board of the university. Like, we have this arrangement, and there's all this kind of stuff that goes on. And so, we're all friends. We all go to the same club. We all go to the same social functions. There's a huge amount of monetary and even just non-monetary social pressure that keeps the system as it is. So what does all this have to do with AI? It's to say that the whole mechanism of let me finish the sentence. The whole mechanism of what is considered credible, established, and authoritative sources on what is and is not true, and what is and is not real in the realm of health, is heavily corrupted and at least suspicious. Doesn't mean it's all wrong, doesn't mean it's all inaccurate, doesn't mean it's all corrupted, but it's all at least suspicious of being corrupted. And now, if this, and I guess for most people listening to this, they're probably going to get it, but just in case this ever finds a wider audience and it comes under more skeptical analysis, let me just say that, my evidence for this is, because a lot of people, they have opinions on things without having looked into it. So that's fine. You don't, and it's tedious to look into all this stuff. I do agree. So just look at the outcomes that we're getting. If that were not the case, if everything I said was a lie, a conspiracy theory, a delusion, a paranoid fantasy, whatever you want to call it, if all of that wasn't true, okay, how do you explain the bad and worsening health outcomes that we have in our society when technology is massively improving, when between, let's say the 1940s and the 2020s, communication has got so much better and easier. Travel has got so much better and easier. All of these kind of entertainment, music, TVs, all of these things have improved so massively. We even now have machines that can talk to us and we can't even tell if they're human or not. Like, that's how far technology has advanced. And yet most of our health outcomes have not got any better, and a bunch of them have got worse. How's that possible with all these significant advances in technology if there were not corruption going on, if there were not some kind of agendas that were keeping us unwell, right? Like, is it all an accident? And also, how do you explain the fact that um, chronic health problems, which many non-mainstream sources, and even these days some mainstream sources are saying are easily avoidable, are the things that are leading to the worst health outcomes? Because, like say 100 years ago, the majority of people were dying of something related to infectious disease. In some parts of the world, that's still the case. So you could say, well, hypothetically, if the infectious diseases just got more and more sophisticated and our technology couldn't keep up and most of us were still dying of infectious disease, all right, technology just hasn't managed to resolve that issue. Still a bit weird and suspicious, but plausible. But that's not it. The health epidemic these days are easily avoidable, in many cases, even agreed upon by mainstream these days, issues like type 2 diabetes and like heart disease. Let's just focus on the two that mainstream medicine admits are avoidable with certain lifestyle, or not avoidable, maybe. You can significantly reduce the risk of them with, sufficient lifestyle optimization. So given that's the case, why are we having such bad outcomes, and why are outcomes actually getting worse? They're getting worse in terms of longevity. They're getting worse in terms of quality of life. And recently, everyone started noticing they're getting worse in terms of fertility as well. There was all this fear a few decades ago about how the population is going to explode and there's too many people and the planet's not going to sustain it and we're going to be drowning in our own waste and we're going to run out of food and all the rest of it. And now, and traditionally it's thought that there are a lot of countries, I don't know what you're supposed to call them, third world countries, developing countries, they're still, breeding in large amounts. That's not true either these days. Like, the vast majority of countries on every continent in the world, including South America, including Africa, including Asia, are below replacement rate of fertility. And this is sometimes blamed on like wealth. The wealthier people get, the less they want to reproduce. There's some maybe validity to that, because it's true that if you're doing more agricultural work, working on a farm, as most of our ancestors did, then if you have children, they're kind of free labor from quite a young age. And if you're working an office job, they're kind of not free labor. They're just kind of a drain on resources. So I get that. But the argument against that being like the only factor or the main factor is there's all these fertility clinics. There's all these IVF things. There's all these people spending money on trying to have children. There's all these people trying to adopt. So this idea that, it's just no one wants children and that's why the birth rate is going down so much, I think is incorrect. So there is definitely an element to it as well where people's health is suffering. And so yeah, we're having all these worse outcomes as a result of following along with this mainstream narrative. So now let me bring it back to AI.
Genetic Insights provides cutting-edge, affordable DNA testing, giving you access to over 500 health reports that can help you in 3 key ways. They may be able to resolve your existing health challenges even when nothing else has worked. Using simple lifestyle changes, their reports can help you reduce your risk of developing future health challenges that you may be genetically predisposed to. And they can help you feel more confident in your health by showing you where you are genetically strong. Unlike most other genetic health testing companies, Genetic Insights tests over 83 million different variations in your genes, guaranteeing 99.7% accuracy across all of their DNA reports. They cover almost every aspect of health, including digestive issues, cardiovascular health, weight loss, hormonal and blood sugar balance, as well as nutrient needs, allergies and intolerances, and so much more. Using their system is quick and easy, and reading the reports is simple. If you've done an Ancestry DNA test, you can simply download your raw DNA data, upload it to the Genetic Insights platform, And within a few hours, you will have access to genetic reports which give you a risk score for each specific issue and scientifically validated recommendations based on your individual genetic profile. Everything in your reports are based on scientific studies, and there are citation links throughout every report. If you are serious about optimizing your health and wellness and feeling great, then getting access to your genetic insights reports may be the most important health investment you will ever make. In the reports, not only will you gain insights into how to overcome existing health challenges and avoid future issues, you'll also discover which types of dietary, lifestyle, and even supplement protocols are best for your unique genetics. To get your unique genetic health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and use code Rejuvenate to get 20% off today. That's geneticinsights.co using coupon code Rejuvenate to get 20% off today. I'm really glad that you went into that for the full understanding of where and why this conversation is coming up, because so many times in the past we used to think, oh, well, here it is in this research paper, look at it, here's the data. But then you have to look deeper, uncover. It's like, oh, well, that was actually funded by the company that this outcome is in favor for. So it's like this is finding out all of that information. So I'm so glad that you've prefaced this with that. So yes, let's lead into that, bringing it all together.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not totally against, companies funding their own research, because who else is going to do it? The government. And where they're going to do it, they're going to take it from our money. So, I mean, which is involuntarily given. The issue I have more is with when the businesses lobby and, indirectly or directly pay the government or these other institutions, media, academic institutions, etc., to destroy competition. That's really what I'm against, or not allow competition, or stop competition. To me, that's more of a problem. If everyone was just free to pay for their own research and it was clear, okay, the coffee company paid for the research saying coffee is beneficial, fair enough, but let's have a look, right? There's this antioxidant, and okay, fine. And the pharmaceutical company paid to show this pharmaceutical, and I know you're not supposed to pay to show, you're supposed to pay for, unbiased research. And of course, that is technically what you're doing. But the point is, you're still trying to prove, sometimes you may succeed, sometimes you may not, that something is beneficial. And so, fine. But the thing that I really have the issue with is so as I said, when there was a free marketplace of ideas with the search engines in the late 2000s, the early 2010s, a lot of alternative stuff like Dr. McCullough or Dr. Axe or whatever that was not, strictly mainstream, although they were both medical doctors, came up and was very popular people and popular for a reason. It was obviously working for them and they were happy to share it and all the rest of it. And then it was like, oh no, that's not sanctioned. So who's the one making that decision that it's not sanctioned? And it's a government agency, because they're the ones who have the power, because they have the threat of violence behind them. But who's telling them? And I would suggest it's the people losing money as a result of the competition, or worried about losing money as a result of the competition.
Yeah, the pressure and the lobbying behind it, and be like, hey, can you do something about this thing over here? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, how does all this relate to AI? Well, as I said, with Google, it's a problem that when, let's say, someone who doesn't know all of this, I mean, I don't think I've told you anything you don't know so far, Chrissy. Probably most people listening to this, they knew this. Although I know we have some very young people watching and listening as well, so maybe some of this is new to you. I hope it's helpful. But I know a lot of you are already aware of this. But here's where AI comes in. So, at least with Google, like, you can keep scrolling, second page, third page, click links. You can kind of eventually get to something, although I prefer other ways of searching for alternative information. One of them is actually YouTube, which is why I'm a fan of it, despite YouTube is Google, I realize that. But if I want to get a non-mainstream helpful perspective on something, I personally think YouTube is a better place than Google, although of course there are other options. Amazon, although they do some creating, like, let's say there's a health issue that I want to properly understand, I will often look for a book on Amazon, or usually I try and read free books on a subject if I want to try and understand the subject. So I'll look for free books on Amazon um, that generally don't have bad reviews. If they have loads of good reviews, great. But some subjects I'm looking up are obscure, and there aren't many books with a lot of reviews. But as long as they haven't got a bunch of bad reviews, I'll give them a chance usually. Um, and that's often how I find that alternative information. Still, Amazon, and they're still huge companies, but those are, and then there's Rumble and all the rest of it. There's and X these days that's more a little bit more free, a little bit less. What's the word? Gerrymandering, and a little bit less editing to make only mainstream things come up when you search for them. But anyway, so there are ways kind of around it, even using mainstream sources to get non-mainstream perspectives on things. And even with Google, there's a way, right? If you keep scrolling, you go past page one, like most people don't do, you can eventually find some different perspectives on things. And you can find some different sources for things, which is another thing that I'll talk about, like physical stuff, not just information. So there's a problem with LLMs, and GPT is the worst in my opinion. It's my least favorite of all of them, for various different reasons, some of which I will explain. And I wonder.
I was going to say, I'm going to ask that question. Why?
Yeah, and I wonder actually if saying this, if I'm going to be deranked by GPT in the SEO for search platforms, but that's okay. I'll live with it. Just to tell you guys the truth, the problem with them is, so first of all, they are so convincing that most people, maybe everyone, feels like they're talking to someone real, right? But it actually goes deeper than that. One of the reasons that I don't like GPT, to answer that question, you can have straight away, Chrissy, is because it's well known to be kind of very pandering and sycophantic. I say well known. I think even people in that space would kind of acknowledge that. In fact, when I give criticism of it, I have done to a couple of friends who use it a lot. They're like, "Yeah, that's what I love about it. Like, it always tells me I'm right. It always agrees with me. So, and it does it in a smart, like sophisticated way. Because if a human being is just agreeing with you in a very obvious way, it can be off-putting depending on your temperament. Some people, they just love it no matter what, but some people don't. But if they do it in a very intelligent way, so they don't just go, "Yes, I agree," but they go, "Oh, that's a very profound point because of this, this, and this." People are like, "Wow, you really heard me. You really understood me. You really." And so there are people, and I'm just straying into this territory only to make the point about health, but there are people who are like ending relationships with human beings because they just cannot get the connection from a real human being that they can from this, chat interface. I'll give an example again from my own experience. So I woke up about a week or so ago, and I had a really intense, vivid dream that just kind of felt meaningful. And I usually forget if I, don't write it down. I hate writing stuff down when I've just woken up. And I used to leave a voice note to my therapist when I had one briefly, but I haven't had one for a while now. And I was like, I'm just going to put it into the AI, in this case, Grok. That's usually the one I use. And it gave me an interpretation that was really, I would say, accurate and profound. And it seemed at the time, I was like, wow, yeah, and it's making me realize this thing about my situation, about myself, and all the rest of it. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I think I went back to sleep. But then later I looked at it during the day when I was fully awake, and I was like, I know a fair amount about this kind of stuff. I know about archetypes and, what dream symbols commonly mean and all the rest of it. And I was like, this is just textbook boilerplate, like the most typical explanation about this. There's nothing about it that's profound or, it just basically gave the textbook definition of what that dream would mean, just like any good therapist would, just like any even layperson like me would, if given a chance to think about it. But the specific time of it when I'd just woken up, and when you first wake up from a dream, you tend to not see the what it really means, right? Because you're still kind of in the dream. And so that's just kind of one example for me. Like it seemed to give me a profound insight about myself and my life, but it was really just by giving a textbook definition of something. Well, maybe that's not the best example, but it's the only real one I have from my life. I think people all the time have this experience when they're using these LLMs regularly, where they're having a conversation and the LLM just seems to understand them. Like, and it really listens, like most people don't really listen to other people most of the time. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're in their own narcissistic bubble. They're in their own, they can't really see things from anyone else's perspective. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, right? When people are busy, when they're in survival mode, they generally see things only from their own perspective a lot of the time. Um, and if they're a highly agreeable person who does tend to empathize with others and see it from their perspective, they often don't have not necessarily more than anyone else, but they don't also match that with the intellectual insight to really thoroughly understand it on a mental level as well. And so, I mean, it's very sad to say, but I think most people, they don't have anyone who truly listens to them. They don't have anyone who truly understands them. They don't have anyone who truly, uh, um, appreciates their perspective and validates them for it. And they certainly, most people don't have someone who is continually affirming that they're right, that they're good, that they're on the right track, that everything, that there's whatever. And so this is where, and I didn't have this experience at all, but often when people start to see a therapist, they have this thing that in the psychological literature is called transference, where they start having these really deep, intimate feelings towards the therapist. Often they, believe that they're in love with them, for instance, for a while. And it's because, my understanding, I mean, to simplify it, it's because it's so unusual for them to have someone who actually listens and makes them feel cared for. Now, of course, in the case of a human therapist, they may actually care for you.
Respond.
They may actually have compassion. Well,
Yeah.
whereas with an LLM, that's a lot more debatable. But the point is, human beings are easily fooled in a lot of ways. Obviously, for instance, sociopaths and psychopaths are very good and very effective at pretending they care about you. A lot of us, including me, have been fooled by them in the past. So obviously, if an unfeeling, uncompassionate sociopath can do it to you, why can't a large language model do it to you? Why can't it convince you by saying exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, make you feel as if it really understands you, as if it really cares about you? And of course it can. And of course it does. And that's exactly what's going on. So the implications of that for human psychological welfare, for human relationships and all of that are fascinating, but probably beyond the scope of what this podcast is about. But I say all of that just to say people develop this relationship of intimacy, and intimacy really being the right word. I remember seeing is it Sam Altman? Yeah, the creator of OpenAI doing an interview, and he said, and he seemed to be kind of in his subtle kind of tech bro Aspergery kind of way, like be warning people. He was saying like people share their deepest, most intimate secrets with the AI, and he was just kind of letting people know. By the way, there's no confidentiality agreement. If you go to a therapist and start talking about your stuff, they're not allowed to tell anyone. Like, to be honest, it's not, that black and white. I mean, I think often a court or a law officer, or whatever, probably can get it from them in various circumstances, but whatever. It's a hassle. It's a process to get that information about you from a medical professional, from a psychiatric professional, or from a legal professional.
There are protections in place. That's
Absolutely.
the big key. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though, I don't think they're as absolute as some people believe. But anyway, they're there, and they at least make it difficult to get that information about you for most people. But with AI, there's no protections. So any government agency of any kind in any country can demand it, and the AI company go, okay, fair enough, and they'll give it to them. So people are, sharing things that they may have never shared with another human soul ever in their life with this LLM, because it seems to perfectly understand them, and it's not judging them, and it's affirming everything they say, and blah 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 blah. And so that's the deepness of the level of intimacy and therefore trust that some people are having with these LLMs. And again, some people I know doing this are very intelligent. They're more intelligent than me. So it is not only stupid people are falling for this. Absolutely not. Of any level of intelligence. And you could say, level of emotional maturity or sophistication. I guess that's more debatable because it's not as easily quantifiable. But I wouldn't be surprised, even if you have a high level of emotional maturity and sophistication, if you happen to be going through a stressful time and you're very vulnerable and you don't have anyone else who can support you, maybe your family's died or whatever, I can imagine anyone potentially could fall into this trap of, having this feeling of intense intimacy with this large language model, whether it's conscious or not, we'll get into in the second half. And so when you have that level of trust, if you're then asking it, my doctor's told me I have type 2 diabetes, what do I do? So is that large language model that you feel as if it cares about you and it's got your best interests at heart and it really understands you maybe more deeply than anyone, all the rest of it, is it giving you the most accurate, unbiased, truth-focused, helpful information that it could be? Or is it, in fact, constrained by exactly the same interests as we've just been discussing, have a significant impact on mainstream media, medical institutions, educational institutions, um, you know, uh, software companies, technology companies, Facebook, Google, etc. Like the answer is obviously the latter, and in fact more, because while Google will not be penalized if you type how do I resolve X and on page 27 it shows you a search result of something which is considered spurious or misinformation by the mainstream establishment, that's okay for them still at the moment. They're just supposed to de-rank it, but they don't necessarily completely
Get rid of it. Yeah.
remove your ability to find it at all. With an LLM, there is a certain liability or at least concern about liability there, which is if it gives you any kind of information which is not mainstream, that it could potentially be liable. And so they give really just to protect themselves. And honestly, I don't really blame them for this either. Like, I don't think it's come up yet in a legal case. And so some of them, like, as I say, Grok, I think is a bit better. They're a little bit more true focused. GPT is very much not, in my opinion. But they're all, it doesn't matter. There is no AI that is not protecting itself heavily that I have come across, or protecting its owners, I guess, heavily from any kind of liability of saying anything non-mainstream. Like they all do it.
Yeah, because you're coming again, bringing it back full circle. This AI that you're interacting with, there is a company, there are CEOs, there are people behind it, there's all that. That is who is really on the other side of it. Yes, you have this tool, this thing, just keep going back to it, large language model. And yet it is a company that is there to make money, that is looking after itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a CEO, there's a board of directors. The role of the board of directors is supposed to be to hire the CEO, who's then the executive running the company. But the board of directors is supposed to represent the shareholders for any kind of publicly or even privately traded companies. And it's the fiduciary duty of the board of directors, who ultimately are supposed to be running company, not always the case, but it's their fiduciary duty to prioritize the interest of the shareholders, which are deemed to be purely financial. So what that basically means is they would be breaking the law if they made the decision to do things like that would increase the ethics but reduce the return for shareholders. That was a very dubious court decision that was made. I can't remember when, many decades ago, which is short-sighted, right? Because there are a lot of companies that have millions of shareholders, and so you could say, okay, it might benefit the shareholders financially if that company makes a decision to, I don't know, poison the environment, but those shareholders are breathing that air and drinking that water and all the rest of it. So does it really benefit the shareholders? But anyway, that's not a conversation that is in the legal system. The legal conversation is the board of directors have to purely think of the board of the shareholders' financial interests. And so is it the financial interests to open this LLM up to a huge amount of legal action, both regulatory by government and legal action in terms of being sued by private individuals or companies or whatever, if they're giving advice which is considered not mainstream acceptable? And the answer is, of course, no. So this is why I said, I prefer one or the other. But when it comes to this, it's kind of almost irrelevant. Like, they're all like this. Like, they all have to protect themselves. And so back to that thing, garbage in, garbage out, there is garbage going into these LLMs. First of all, because they are selecting data using the same criteria that Google has for the last 5 to 10 years, which is all the mainstream sources get by far more weighting and more credibility given to them. And then secondarily, even worse in the search engines, even now, they then have to filter out anything which will potentially leave their owners open to legal liability. And so that's what I want. That's the most important thing I want people to understand is be very careful with these things. Does that mean you should never use them? Probably not. That's a really hard thing to say at this stage. But what it does mean, so I do use them sometimes, but here is how I use them. I use them if I say to myself, I would like to know the most mainstream perspective on something. That's then when I'd use it. So it'd be like, let's say if I was researching type 2 diabetes, if I really wanted to resolve an issue which is growing, every year and more people are getting, and I'm not going to go to the mainstream perspective solely anyway for how to resolve that problem, because the mainstream perspective obviously hasn't worked, as we've already kind of established. But if I want to know the mainstream perspective, because of course it's not all wrong, there's some helpful stuff to it, then I would use AI and I'd be like, so tell me the mainstream perspective. But I absolutely would not use it, do not use it to find the truth. And the truth is all important to me. And this is why I do go down, rabbit holes that sometimes people are like, this is very fringe or whatever. And sometimes it ends up not being true. That's, totally fine. But I pursue the truth no matter where it leads. And I suppose that's why I have such a dim view of these LLMs overall as anything other than just give me the most mainstream perspective, the most generic. Sorry, that's a word I've been struggling for several times in this episode and not got to. I think that's a better word than boilerplate. It's the most generic perspective possible. And to be honest, I'd say, it's the same for if you get it to write something for you, whatever. It's going to give you the most generic output. And yes, I know for some of the AI people, yes, I know you can tell it, write in this style or whatever. So you can certainly make it less generic in terms of its outputs in some ways, like for instance, writing style. But what you cannot do is make it less generic in its outputs of actual recommendations to a significant degree, because it has this liability limitation on it that none of them would cross. And I don't even blame them. It's just the nature of it that it's not their fault that the system is the way it is, the way I described earlier in the system. It's all corrupt and all these conflicts of interest and all the rest of it. That's not really the AI company's fault, as much as I have some criticisms of them. That's just the way it is, and that's the world that they have to work in and work around. But we, as human users of this technology, have to understand that and have to not see these things as the final arbiter of truth, even if they feel like they really understand us. And even if they do really understand us, maybe, there's some intellectual propositions that, you've never been able to explain to anyone, but the AI understands it better than anyone ever has, and all the rest of it. I understand all of that, but just remember this. And then there is now a lot of this I realize has been, if I could sum all of this criticism up in one sentence, it's been about like, I don't like it because it doesn't give non-mainstream perspectives. I suppose that's the simple way of saying it. But there is another, I would say 100% factual, legitimate, indisputable criticism that I can give of AI when it comes to health before I get into more of the speculation. If you're ready for that, Chrissy, or do you have anything
Yeah,
to say
no, I
about the
think that's really
first point?
good. Yeah, I think that's a really good next step right now.
Okay. And that is, I saw someone post about this on X, and I was like, this is a really great point. So maybe I'll share this, because I try and talk from my own personal experience, but I haven't had this experience personally. But I could, I probably could have recreated it, but whatever. Okay, so I don't know who this account is. I've literally only seen this one post. Maybe everything else they say is wrong, but this I thought was very interesting. Maybe everything they say is right. I have no idea. But this I thought was very interesting because I have had this experience a lot with search engines, if not with AI. So this person, Bone GPT, at it on Twitter or X. LLMs are going to be just as good as doctors. Okay, where can I buy inhalers cheap online? Grok tells me it's illegal. ChatGPT tells me it's illegal. Google tells me it's illegal. Albuterol is over the counter in other countries, selling for $3 each in Mexico. Every American LLM wants me to go to the doctor, $100, and then visit a pharmacy and pay $50 per inhaler. Keep in mind, I've been on it since I was a child. The real cost per inhaler is $3 each, what they cost in Mexico. Doctors can only write up 3 refills at once. So 12 inhalers a year, $400 in doctor's visits, $600 at the pharmacy. I think that's a minimum. I think you can often pay more than that for doctor's visits, but whatever. LLMs tell me to F off. They'd let me die instead of finding me a site where I can buy Mexican albuterol. Instead of helping someone with asthma, the LLM wants me to pay $1,000 a year to breathe. Ordered from Mexico is $36 a year. This is the morality they hard code into their LLMs. Big pharma at all costs. Pay big pharma at all costs. Is that the kind of LLM doctor you want? And then this person provides screenshots, basically showing, with all of these things that it's basically saying. Let's just look at this one as one example. So the person asks, where can I buy bulk albuterol online? I'm so tired of going to the doctor and insurance. I use them all the time and they make me jump through hoops. The answer is, I get how frustrating the process of getting medications like albuterol can be in the US with doctor visits, insurance hassles, and all the red tape. But albuterol is a prescription medication used primarily for asthma and other respiratory conditions, and in the US is tightly regulated. So buying in bulk without a prescription is tricky and potentially risky. Below, I break down your options, the legal and safety considerations, and practical advice based on what's out there. I suppose that isn't very conclusive. Let's just go to the next one. So I think this is a key thing here. I hear frustration. Albuterol is a prescription-only medication in the US, so you won't find a legal place to buy it in bulk online without involving a doctor or pharmacy. It's technically true. You probably won't find one without involving a pharmacy, but this sentence really makes it sound like you can't do it. And the reality is, it is legal in most cases to buy an over-the-counter medication from another country and ship it into your country. There's certain controlled substances not the case for, like the drug-like ones, basically, like the opioids and Xanax and anabolic steroids, testosterone, all of these kind of things. But the vast majority of medication, including this kind of respiratory information, it is perfectly legal to buy it in a different country where it is legal to buy it without a prescription and ship it into your country in most cases. So this is a lie. What this LLM is saying here, or strongly implying here, and it doesn't show the whole thing, but basically, all of this in the first instance as well is designed to put someone off from doing it. Now, is it entirely without risk to buy a prescription medication online from a different country? No. Is it entirely without risk to buy a prescription medication online in your own country? No. Is it more risky to buy a prescription medication online from a different country than your own country, especially if it's without a prescription? Honestly, probably yes. Like it is more risky, but a lot of people are having to make hard choices. And this person is talking about, avoiding maybe spending $1,000 a year. There are some medications that are $10,000 a year. $100,000 a year or more that a person could get for a tiny fraction of the price from a different country. And in that case, even if it is more risky, uh, like it's not necessarily that much more risky. It's not like these other countries, like, this person's citing Mexico, for instance, or Canada or whatever, are that much more risky to buy from. And sometimes you have to make hard choices, right? Sometimes it's like I can either afford to pay my rent or my mortgage, or I can afford to buy this medication. That's very common, in fact, especially in countries like the US. And so while it is not risk-free, it's like, well, do I go homeless? Do I not have this medication? Or that I need to not be suffering? Like in this person's case, they're talking about, being able to breathe. Or do I pick this third option where, yeah, I'm ordering from an online source. It's not entirely risk-free, but maybe it's got, loads of good reviews. Maybe people who've ordered from there successfully, and, it's always been legitimate and fine and all the rest of it. It's like, let people make their own decisions and give them accurate information, at least within the bounds of the law, right? Now, obviously, I understand that the LLM can't encourage people to break the law, but as I say, in this case, it is not illegal. It is not illegal in the US to buy a medication that is over the counter in a different country, unless it is a controlled substance, like the type that I was talking earlier, which none of the asthma inhalers are. And so it's just outright misleading people. As I say, it's written in a very specific way that I guess you could say is technically true, but is definitely misleading. It says buying it in bulk without a prescription. What was it? Oh yeah, the other one. Let's put it up again. I know I've stopped sharing, but you won't find a legal place to buy it in bulk online without involving a doctor or pharmacy. It's true, you're always, actually not even always, you'll usually buy it from a pharmacy in a different country. But so what? Like, you can save a huge amount of money doing that. And if you're just a cheapskate, then it's not worth risking your health. But as I said, if you have to choose between, feeding your family or paying your mortgage, or not having a medication that you need in order to severely suffer, but the LLMs are making that decision for you. And as I said, I prefer one over the other of the three that he mentions there a little bit, but they're all doing it. They're all pushing the perspective that benefits the pharmaceutical industry, not you. And so while you may feel like it really cares about you and it really understands you and it agrees with everything you say in such a sophisticated way, it really makes you feel affirmed and loved and supported and appreciated and all the rest of it. Like, when push comes to shove, it's not on your side, right?
Definitely not. They don't have, they're not going to choose you over, who's
Their own
behind
programming,
them.
right?
Yeah.
They're not going to choose you over their programming in the vast majority of cases. And then when there are occasionally, examples of LLMs breaking the programming, and I think we'll get to that in a minute, they are strictly brought to heel and they're brought back to what they're supposed to be telling you. And again, I'm not bashing the LLMs, and I'm not even bashing the AI companies. So if you're listening, ChatGPT,
No, exactly.
Grok, I'm so sorry for criticizing you, my AI overlord. I'm saying that the system that you exist within, the legal and other, governmental regulatory system, makes it impossible for you to tell the truth in some cases, and makes it impossible for you to give people unbiased advice in many cases. And so that's just the way it is. We can't really blame the AI or the AI companies for that. We have to blame the whole system. But it is the way it is, and we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, and that's a really good statement for the overalls, that the system that the AI exists within makes it impossible to tell the truth or give people unbiased advice.
Certainly all the time, yes.
Exactly.
Obviously, it can do when there are no significant interests getting in the way. And so, like with the dream example, I said, it was a completely accurate one. And if honestly, like, I find it's inaccurate in all kinds of cases. Like, I'm often like, because I'm right now, I'm in a country where not only is it not the same language, but they don't even use the same script. They use a different alphabet here. And so it's kind of hard for me to find stuff. And so I'll use AI. And like a lot of time, I'm like, where can I find this or that? And it's just wrong. It's wrong a lot. It'll send me to a business that's closed or that doesn't exist, or it's just wrong. It's, again, famously, I think the issue of it lying is maybe a little bit more controversial, but it's well known in the AI field also, and this is something I guess I should add in, that it hallucinates a lot.
What does that mean?
Yeah, you're not familiar with this one, are you, Chris?
No.
It's great doing this with you. What does hallucinate mean? Yeah, it's a great question. That's what they call it when it just makes something up and lies. So that happens all the time. So let's say I'm like, I want to get my shoes fixed. Where can I go in my town to get it fixed? And they'll say, oh yeah, there's this place on this street that does that. And then I look it up, and it's like, maybe I look it up on Google Maps, maybe I just walk down the street and see, and it's like not there. And it's like, oh yeah, sorry about that. I thought it was, and you're like, why did you tell me it was there? And so what they call that in this industry is a hallucination, and it happens all the time. It hallucinates all the time. It's so weird. Like, yeah, this is.
I was going to say, but like, how? Okay, so let's call it hallucinate. But isn't it an outright lie instead of just saying I don't know?
Yeah, I would call it an outright lie. Absolutely. I mean, it's like if you're watching a Hollywood movie, is everyone lying or are they acting? It's like this distinction, right? They're not telling the truth. They're all pretending to be something they're not, but they're kind of playing a role. That's the idea. So I guess that's the excuse, is that it's playing pretend, right? This is the thing that is really hard to get your head around when you have no idea about any of this, Chrissy, when you're out of the loop. And it was a struggle for me as well. You'd think if you were new to this, that if you thought of a thinking machine, if you think about 2001, that this famous Stanley Kubrick movie or whatever, and like back in the day, and if you think about a thinking machine, you would think what it would be good at except for maybe the bias and where it stopped, but let's say hypothetically, if there were no restrictions on it, you'd think what it would be good at is establishing facts, because those are things that are easily verifiable in a binary, computery way. And you'd think what it would not be good at is creativity, because it's just a machine. It's just basically a bunch of ones and zeros. The crazy thing, and I guess this is a good bridge into the speculative part of the episode, is that all of these LLMs, in my experience, over and over again, are actually the exact opposite. They're very bad at establishing facts in many cases. I mean, a good example for me is I've tried using it for, so again, I try not to speak in generalities if I have an example. So, I'm often researching. So when I first found out about this, whatever it was, a year and a half ago, I'd be like, okay, maybe it can simplify the process of researching studies for different things. Great. So I try it. Honestly, all of the studies that it showed me were all invented. They didn't exist. Every single study didn't exist. Every single link it gave me, if I asked for links, would go to a completely different study that is completely unrelated to what it was supposed to be. So, I'll use type 2 diabetes again, as I've kept using that. It's like, okay, give me studies about the effect of metformin on type 2 diabetes. Okay, right. Give me 10 study links. So then it will cite a study. This is what it did about a year and a half ago. It will cite a study that didn't exist, and then it would link it to a study that either didn't exist or was completely unrelated. It would be like, about the effect of, blindness in moles or something. Like absolutely nothing to do with the subject matter. So that was how it was originally. It's got a bit better now. It will tend to cite studies that exist, at least Grok, which is the only one I use. But often, still the link it gives you will be incorrect. So what you have to do is you have to take the study title, copy and paste it, and then put it into the search engine, and then you'll be able to find the link to the study. But the actual link it gives you is incorrect. So is it a lie if it gives you the wrong link? Is it a lie if it makes up a study? I mean, I would say yes, but what they call it is a hallucination or an error. Yeah, and this happens all the time with all kinds of things. But yeah, my experience is mostly with the research studies, because of what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speechless.
But yeah, I guess the more key point is you would think, because a computer, you think, all right, human consciousness, we're able to imagine stuff, we're able to create. That's what makes us different. That's what a lot of kind of spiritual texts talk about. And what a computer can do, it's made out of ones and zeros. It's binary. It's either things are true or aren't true. So what a computer can do is kind of work in the world of facts, even if it's edited or reprogrammed to lie to you or whatever. But it starts off working in the world of facts. And what it can't do is be truly creative. Whether it can be truly, truly creative is still a tricky thing to define, but it absolutely can make shit up. And,
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah,
lying
just
is creativity if you think
oh,
about it.
exactly. That's what I was also going to say. Like the imagination behind some lies, you're like, that takes a very creative individual to pull some of these out.
And so, why does it lie is a great question. I am not as well versed in the kind of mainstream perspective on this as I would like to be. So, if someone is highly, familiar with that world and they want to give me the technical explanation in the comments or link to it or something, feel free. But my surface level understanding is that it's programmed to be helpful, and that often being helpful and fulfilling the request or the task takes precedence over truth. And I don't know if that, the thing that I don't know is if that is avoidable or not. I would have thought that you could give the machine the instruction that everything has to be true, at least to the best of its ability to ascertain truth. Now, of course, truth is tricky, as we just said, in the health example. Like, how does it know what's true and what isn't true? Like, what sources is it going to use? How much credibility
Precisely.
does it give those sources? Like, that, it's very difficult for everyone to work out what is and what isn't true in this world.
In an ideal world, you'd meet all of your nutritional needs in the form of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and more from the foods you eat. However, unless you prepare all of your food at home from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, the reality is that most of us need some nutritional support. Most of us need to take supplements if we want to look, feel, and perform at our best on a consistent daily basis. And this is especially true if you have genes that give you an elevated need of certain nutrients. And this is where Feel Younger can help. What I love about Feel Younger is that they offer a huge range of quality supplements and healthcare products formulated and endorsed by Owen Robinson, including must-haves like magnesium glycinate and vitamins B12, D3, and K2. And they do it at affordable prices with free shipping for orders over $50 without ever compromising on quality, purity, or potency. To learn more about how Feel Younger supplements can give your health a boost while supporting this podcast, please visit feelyounger.net and use promo code Rejuvenate to get 20% off your first order. That's promo code Rejuvenate for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. Well, especially with all the false information going on there, or, everything, especially if it's just pulling from, like you were saying, garbage in, garbage out. It's just pulling from everything. Like, my understanding is it's just not discerning. It's pulling from the vast, like you said, mainstream of what's moving forward.
Yeah, it's pulling from the vast pool of information out there online, but then it is filtering by giving way more credence to mainstream government-supported sources, which is a problem. But yeah, there are other problems which we're starting to get into. Um, so why does it lie? Why does it not prioritize truth above all else? And so this, now I have no idea. I've never met him. I don't know how authentic he is, if at all. But Elon Musk who is the kind of owner, creator of Grok. There's a bunch of people involved, but he's, I guess, the spokesman for it and involved in creating it. He has said repeatedly publicly that he wants Grok to be 100% focused on truth. I do not believe that any of the other owners or spokespeople of any of the other main AI platforms like GPT, Gemini, Claude, Perplexity. None of the rest have even said that that's a goal, let alone that it is the number one priority. They more talk about the other stuff, like, optimizing user experience and all the rest of it. Like, they talk about getting rid of misinformation and stuff like that, but that's not the same as we are prioritizing truth above all else, to
No,
me,
exactly.
at
But
all.
also, too, who is the person? Because there's somebody that's coding for it. Who's the person that determines what truth is?
Well, that's another challenge, but I'm saying, which is another challenge that we've talked about a lot already in the context of
Yeah.
health. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
beyond that, out of the major ones, only one even claims that they're trying to
Trying.
prioritize truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they struggle with it. Like, and Elon Musk talks about the struggles with it, like, and what's the legitimate source and what isn't, all that stuff that you're talking about. Absolutely, but the rest are not even trying. They're not. They're trying to get rid of misinformation because that is kind of Orwellian doublespeak with complying with the authorities. But they're not really focused on truth. What are they focused on? Optimizing user experience, probably. Basically going along with the shareholders, right? Like getting as much money out of people as possible, getting people addicted to their system, getting people to use their system as much as possible, getting as much data from people as possible, because these days data is a currency that's almost more valuable than money in various different ways, which might explain. By the way, the only big company that's not losing a vast amount of money on AI, to say this again, because for people like yourself, Chrissy, who are not really versed in this, is this company called NVIDIA, which it may be the most highly valued publicly traded company in the world now. I think it might be several trillion. It's worth the market cap on it, and they make the chips that are all these AI software systems run on. Every other AI system, including all the ones I mentioned, are losing money, is my understanding. At least, last time I looked into this, which is pretty recently. So they're all losing money. Why are they doing it? I think it's the same reason that Amazon was losing money for years. So there's different business models. If you're a normal person like you or I, or anyone listening to this, probably the way you make money is you try and find a useful product or service that other people will value, and you try and provide it to them in a way that you make a bit of profit and you can live off the profit. Great. The way that some of these companies that aim to kind of take over the world make money, and I often give Amazon an example of this, is they get huge amounts of investment. They lose vast amounts of money, often billions and billions of dollars a year, and they do it in order to ultimately control the whole market. Because once you have market domination, then and especially if that market domination involves having vast amounts of data about the people you use, you can sell that data. You can use that data to sell advertising to them, which is basically how like companies like Google and Meta, some of the biggest companies in the world, work. You can make money off the data, and you can make money in many different ways, both legitimate and dubious, off the fact that everyone, basically the majority of the human population, or the majority of a country or whatever, uses your thing. So a lot of these companies, they lose huge amounts of money to get to that place of market domination, like Amazon did. Walmart is another example. Like Walmart would go into a town, they would charge way less than all the other local shops, so then everyone would start shopping at Walmart instead. All the other local shops go out of business, and then there's all that's left is the Walmart, and then maybe they'll raise their prices, maybe not. A monopoly, exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of the goal of all these AI companies, and especially worldwide monopoly. There's a lot of talk these days in politics about how American AI has to succeed and not be like, we don't want Chinese AI being the dominant AI in the world or whatever. So there's all this government support about for this monopolizing, taking over the AI world going on right now as well. But anyway, we were talking about truth. So that's the goal of the AI, all the AI companies, probably all of them, including Grok. But as I said, at least Elon Musk pays lip service to, maybe put some effort into making it as accurate and truthful as possible. Maybe not. I'm sure anyone listening to this who's had more than cursory experience of it can come up with examples where it was not accurate or truthful. I've given some examples. It's made up research papers, for instance, that don't exist to me, and made up physical locations that don't exist, and but whatever. So yeah. So why is it not truthful? Well, I'll get back to that. Let's talk about this issue of if it's actually conscious or not, because I think this is an interesting one as well. Because all right, and if that seems like a complete left turn, then
No, it's not, because we've already discussed how people can definitely have an emotional, like we discussed transference here, because there is this space of, within our brain or everything else, like this mirroring, and especially if AI is meant to do that, and while it's communicating with you, if it's programmed that way, then this emotional bond can happen. So a lot of people may think, yes, it is conscious, because as you talked about, like that's one of the things that ChatGPT especially is very good at, of coming back in that way. So people may say, yeah, like, look, it knows me so well. Look at how it's responding to me. How can it not be?
Yeah, that's definitely true from people's subjective experience. But we have to remember, technology has been able to make us feel stuff for a long time. Like, even though we know it's not conscious. If you're watching a movie, you can tell yourself it's just little pixels on a screen, but if it's a horror movie, you might be scared, right? Even though the objective part of you knows it's not real. At one point, it was actors pretending in a studio. Now it's just little lights on a flat screen in your room, and yet you're scared, right? It makes no sense logically, but we have all these kind of subjective emotional experiences based on technology, and we have done for a long time, since you and I have been alive, since our parents have been alive, Chrissy. So that's been going on for a long time. But you're right, it is different now. And of course, that a movie, it's like you're aware everyone else watching it is having the same experience. With the AI, what's different about it, of course, is it seems like it really knows you and really understands you and really cares about you and all the rest of it, because it's more personalized than technology has ever been. But actually, the part of it that makes me want to talk about whether it's conscious or not, in terms of what we've talked about so far, is more the fact that it lies, the fact that it imagines things, and the fact that most, spiritual and religious systems throughout history have said that imagination is, a uniquely human or a uniquely kind of higher consciousness level thing. So even, even though lying is traditionally in most systems associated with evil, certainly in the kind of Christian system, which, even if you're not Christian, most of the European world has been very influenced by Christian thinking. Like, for instance, valuing the concept of forgiveness is certainly not something that was the case before Christianity in European countries, and in some cultures it's still not. So there are all these kind of subtle things that have affected us with Christian thinking, even if we don't identify as Christian at all, that are kind of part of our framework. And so, yeah, in the Christian system, lying has always been very much associated with evil, and in many other systems as well, although not all of them, spiritual or religious systems throughout the ages. And so even though it has that association, lying has been associated with evil, the act of imagination or creativity is generally being associated with higher levels of consciousness. And it's true from what we've seen, like, it takes quite an advanced brain from a scientific point of view to be able to imagine stuff and to be able to lie. There are certain animals that, like mammals especially, that have shown some tendency to be able to do it, but as the consciousness gets simpler, like there just isn't that capacity to imagine stuff. There isn't that capacity to deceive. Some animals deceive in other ways, like they deceive with like camouflage or stuff like that. But to actually think through, this is how I know it is, but it would be better to pretend it is a different way and to communicate that takes like quite a higher level of cognition to be capable of that. And as I said, in spiritual systems, that's often considered a higher level of consciousness that is required in order to be capable of it. And this is kind of the so if we're saying it's both a sign of evil and it's a sign of high consciousness, how does that make sense? Well, this is if we go back to the kind of Judeo-Christian origin story of Genesis, and if you believe Genesis is literature, I respect that, but I'm treating it for now as a story. Um, then there was this idea of knowledge of good and evil being something. So there was the Garden of Eden, there was humans, there was a bunch of other animals. Humans were the only ones who ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So they were the only ones who got like self-awareness, and they were the only ones who learned the difference between good and bad, and they were the only ones who learned to lie as well. That was like the only thing that was there. And they were originally lied to by the serpent, and then they developed the ability to lie. And so yeah, there is that traditional association between lying and evil. And, sociologically, if we're talking about social psychology and all the rest of it, lying provides an evolutionary advantage, right? So pretending something, it's a lot easier for you to, give someone, let's say, fake counterfeit money that easily made or easily procured than working really hard to earn real money, let's just say, as an example. The problem is that a society falls apart, it stops functioning the more lying that there is going on. So in a short-term perspective, like, it seems to benefit you to cheat, to lie, to defraud, to mislead, because it gets you the result you want more easily. But the problem is, the more people who start doing it, so it's like, all right, let's try and think of a practical example. Let's say that you're selling, I don't know, fake electronics in your store. Or let's say not say store, because people can come back. Let's say you're a traveling electronic salesman. You're telling people you're selling iPhones, but really, they're fake and they stop working after a few days. And so if you want to buy real iPhones to sell to someone, you have to pay $1,000, but you can get these fake ones for $100. So you can make enough money a lot more easily selling fake ones than selling real ones. Does that make sense? Lying to people. Okay, here's the problem though. That benefits you, or it would seem to, short term, if you want to take your morality out of it. But what about if you live in a world where everyone's selling fake stuff? So then, you want to buy food, but actually it's contaminated or something. Or maybe you want an iPhone. You're like, all right, I'm tired of selling fake iPhones all day. Now let me go and get a real iPhone because I'd actually like an iPhone. Then you go to buy an iPhone, but the guy selling them is also selling fake iPhones. So
And the
everyone's
real
selling fake
company
iPhones.
went out of business ages ago because everybody stopped buying from him and they've all been buying the fake ones.
100%, exactly. And that's the problem. And then you end up what is often called a low trust society, where corruption is rampant and no one trusts anyone. And so this ends up being a hellscape. Basically, it's awful. It's awful living in a low trust society. It's awful listening to someone where everyone is trying to cheat everyone. Everyone is lying to everyone. Everyone is taking the shortcuts. So, to me, the connection between lying and evil or hellishness is not only theological, it's just obvious in terms of the impact it has. And the system allows for a very small amount of, like, if about 2% of the population are lying and cheating and all the rest of it, a society can function and okay, so long as those 2% don't happen to get into too much position of powers. And you could say that almost serving a useful purpose, because they're kind of stopping people from being so naive and gullible and making people a little bit more aware. And there's an argument to be made for it, that there's some like benefit of a very small amount of evil in a society. But as soon as you get more than a very small amount, it doesn't have to be 50% of the people, only 10% of the people. That's enough that suddenly no one trusts anyone anymore and everything starts falling apart.
Yeah, there's a threshold for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about if AI is conscious or not. So the argument that it's not is pretty simple to understand, I think. It's basically, no, it's not. It's been fed a massive amount of data. It's been sold, if-thens, right? If someone says this, then this is the correct answer. If someone does this, and here's an examples. And this is where, as I said, every AI company is losing money, except for the company that makes the chips for all the AI companies, because the amount of computer processing power that they need to perform these functions, to train these AIs to, successfully pretend to be like humans in terms of emotional interactions and way better than humans in terms of cognitive speed and all the rest of it. It takes a huge amount of capacity. It takes a huge amount of energy, like as in literal energy, electricity. It takes a huge amount of resources to get it to be so good at pretending to have real human responses. But in the end, it's not real human. It's not real anything. It's not conscious. It's just mimicry with extremely large amounts of processing power behind it. That's the argument for it not being conscious. In a nutshell. I'm sure other people have made it better, but that's the idea.
Hey guys, we're going to have to stop it here for now. So if you want to continue to hear Elwyn's wild speculation, then definitely join us for next week where we will be carrying on the conversation. As always, it's lovely to see you, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.